Through the Moon is an absolutely devastating chapter in the story of the Dragon Prince. It comes immediately after not only Season 3, but also right after the end of what showrunner Aaron Haas describes as the show's first big section, its first big division. There are 3 different periods of the show. The first is Seasons 1 through 3, the second is Seasons 4 and 5, and the third and final is Seasons 6 and 7. The events in this comic also come, I believe, before a large time gap between Seasons 3 and 4. Because of all this, I believed that the graphic novel would not disrupt the status quo too roughly, instead leaving things pretty much as they are when we get to the start of Season 4. But this is not to be. I was spectacularly wrong. Instead of keeping the status quo, Through the Moon completely disrupts it, separating Callum and Rayla. Under different circumstances, this could come off as contrived or cliché, but not here. Here it is exactly what these 2 characters would do in this situation. Of course Rayla would leave. It's in line with her character and her greatest fears. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, how does this affect the Dragon Prince as a show going forward? To what extent will the disruption in the comic be carried into the show itself? Let's investigate. The relationship between Rayla and Callum is going very well by the time we get to the end of Season 3 of The Dragon Prince. The relationship has really grown and blossomed since they got together in the midpoint of Season 3. And I am so dang happy that they did not spend the entire season, or, God forbid, the entire show, building up this will they or won't they tension. Now, I know a lot of people like that kind of stuff. I'm not entirely unsympathetic to y'all. They love the anticipation. They love the romantic tension. But for me, all that stuff is just a distraction from what I find genuinely interesting, which is the work that goes in to the process of building a relationship. We see how much these 2 care about each other, to the extent that they don't entirely understand that not everyone is on the same wavelength as they are. Not everyone is as euphoric about this pairing happening. They don't think before they kiss in front of Ezrin, and he is completely taken aback. Now, this is, of course, an extremely funny bit, but there is emotional resonance to it nonetheless. I mean, how would you react were you in his position? How would you react if you saw your half-brother kissing the girl who was trying to kill you? But though Ezrin gets over his shock, the relationship between these 2 never becomes perfect. And that's good, dramatically speaking. If it were perfect, it would be boring. They're extremely young, and they have never been in a serious romantic relationship before. What that means is that they don't really know what they're doing. This does not mean their relationship is doomed to fail, but it does mean that there's a lot of room to grow. They have to really start understanding each other and start understanding how they are going to make this relationship succeed. Just because they care about each other, just because they love each other, does not mean the relationship is necessarily going to work long term. Now, we see some of this at the end of Season 3, but it is much more pronounced in the graphic novel Through the Moon. They have a fight in which Rayla accuses Callum of wanting her to forget about her parents. Callum tries to clarify that no, this is not what he means, that he just thinks it's not healthy for her to fixate on the tragic past of hers so heavily. He tries to empathize with her, saying that, yeah, his parents are gone too, but she rebuffs him, saying that at least he knows what happened to them. This reminds me a little of an adolescent version of the relationship between Nora and Kevin in one of my all-time favorite shows, The Leftovers. But since a lot of y'all have not seen that show, I assume I'll just move on and say that the split between Callum and Rayla proves deeper than they initially anticipated. Callum responds to Rayla's complaints by saying that, yeah, he knows what happened to his parents, they're dead, and his father, well, technically his stepfather, but Callum considers him his father, King Harrow, died because of one of the people Rayla is mourning, Runan. Rayla becomes angry when he brings this up, but you can see his point. This is all fascinating and devastating and heartbreaking. You can try to transcend the ill relations that have existed between elves and humans for centuries, but those memories of violence and bloodshed still linger just beneath the surface, waiting to be unleashed. Now, the adults are not that worried about Callum's fight, and he's a little offended at this, because it's devastating for him, and he doesn't think that those around him are taking him that seriously. What they say is that, oh, it's typical. Couples fight. It's part of the process of building a relationship. It's not good necessarily, but you'll get through it, Callum. This is an interesting perspective, and not one I'm really accustomed to hearing from an animated show directed at a younger audience. And for the sake of these two and everyone who, like myself, is invested in their relationship, I hope the adults are right here. I hope this is just a passing phase. But the rest of the comic does a lot to illustrate that the rift between these two is a lot deeper and wider than anyone is willing to admit. Lying is a central idea in this comic. It comes up time and time again. Under what circumstances is it acceptable to lie to someone you love if you're doing it for both of your benefits? It's a hard question, and the comic does not provide any answers. This is not a moral or philosophical text. It's not trying to come to the one absolute truth. Rather, it is much more interested in subjectivity. It's much more interested in analyzing how characters respond to these ideas when they're placed in difficult situations. All of this coalesces into a genuinely heartbreaking ending. In the evening, Rayla and Callum make the decision to look for Viren together. At this point, Rayla has no real evidence that Viren is alive. She just has a feeling. Things didn't quite feel right to her in the Moon Nexus when she saw Viren in that weird cocoon-like thing. But Callum supports her. He stands by her. He doesn't question her. He does basically everything you would want your significant other to do if you were in Rayla's position. And yet none of it matters. She leaves him very early in the morning to go look for Viren. Now, I really like this from an artistic standpoint. Character progression is not linear. Just because your demons are conquered does not mean they stay conquered. Zuko's story in Avatar: The Last Airbender is not remarkable because he begins as a villain and becomes a hero by the show's conclusion. That is a fairly common story progression, at least on a basic level. No, what's interesting about Zuko's story is how he makes that transformation. He's constantly questioning himself. He's constantly holding up the beliefs instilled into him by his upbringing to the light of the circumstances he encounters. Do the ideals he's been told match with his actual lived reality? Do these ideals match with all the suffering he sees while journeying through the Earth Kingdom, for instance. And he also makes mistakes. This is important. If Zuko did not decide to betray Team Avatar at the end of Season 2 and side with Azula, I doubt his redemption would have been as fondly remembered. This is why I have problems with the term character arc, or at least one of the reasons I have problems with that term. Character journey is not an arc, at least not when it's done right. People are not geometry problems. We regress and make mistakes, and that's okay, that's life. And so it is with Rayla here. At the Dragon Prince, Rayla has been possessed by fear. She's less in its grasp than before, but its hold on her is still firm. She is completely terrified of losing those she cares about the most. If she lost Callum on her bold, brazen adventure to go try and see if Viren really is alive, she would be completely alone, and she would never forgive herself. So she turns away from Callum and goes to hunt Viren. Now, it is easy from our privileged vantage point as the audience to say that this is a terrible decision, that it's irrational, that why doesn't she understand that Callum is going to go after her wherever she goes? Now, all this is true, but consider that Rayla might know this deep down, and it might not matter to her. All that matters to her right now is protecting those she cares about the most and achieving inner peace, and she's going to try and do that, whatever the consequences may be. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching The Dragon Prince. It is a brilliant, haunting, empathetic show, and it is only getting better with time. I'm so glad they renewed it for Season 4, and I can't wait for that Season 4 to finally come. Here's hoping it comes soon. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. That will be coming soon, I assure you of that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.